Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with permission, I'll update the House on my recent international engagements and our work to strengthen the security of our continent and our economy. Starting, Mr. Speaker, with the situation in Ukraine, which of course is at the forefront of all of our minds. Over recent days, I've had detailed discussions with allies. I met the partners of the Coalition of the Willing during the G20, and I've spoken a number of times to both President Trump and President Zelensky, who I spoke to again earlier this morning. Mr. Speaker, we're united in wanting a ceasefire and a permanent end to the horrendous suffering that this war has brought to Ukraine. I have always said our aim must be a just and lasting peace, and both of those words, Mr. Speaker, are important: just and lasting. So, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the continued efforts of the United States to end the war and stop the killing. The initial draft of the 28-point plan included points that were not acceptable, but also some very important elements that will be essential for a just and lasting peace. For example, it sets out steps on security guarantees from the US and partners. This is very significant, and the discussions in Geneva took important steps forward, with progress between the US and Ukraine on an updated peace framework. I can reassure the House that work is ongoing to refine this plan. And, Mr. Speaker, we're clear about the fundamental principles here: that Ukraine's sovereignty must be maintained, that Ukraine should be able to defend herself in future, and that matters about Ukraine and its future must be determined by Ukraine. We are clear their voice must always be at the heart of the process, and elements relating to Europe and NATO will need the consent of Europe and NATO members. So there's still a long way to go and a tough road ahead, but we're more committed than ever to this cause and to pushing forward on this process. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, later this afternoon, President Macron, Chancellor Merz and I will convene the Coalition of the Willing, which now has 36 members, to discuss how we can advance the peace process and to discuss how we can continue to keep Ukraine in the fight right now. Because, Mr. Speaker, Ukraine continues to hold the line. They continue to mount a fearless defence of their country, and they deserve not just our respect, but our help and our support. After all, it is not just our values that are at risk here, it's our security too. In addition to targeting energy and food prices, Putin continues to seek to undermine our security, including, Mr. Speaker, by sending Russian ships into our waters. The Royal Navy intercepted 2 Russian ships in our waters in the last 2 weeks. So let me assure the House we are more ready and determined than ever to protect our territory and protect the British people. As we work towards that end, we will never let up on the support that Ukraine needs, the vital defensive capabilities it needs to protect its people, and the economic pressure that we must continue to mount on Russia to cut off the fuel to their war machine. Mr. Speaker, the urgent need to take Russian oil and gas off the global market was something I discussed extensively at the G20. This is vital, especially now, as winter begins to bite in Ukraine and Putin continues his barbaric attacks on civilians and civilian energy infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the House will recall that it was when the global financial crisis struck that the G20 showed its full potential, when my predecessor, Gordon Brown, marshalled a global response to that crisis to protect the savings and finances of the British people. And so, in this moment of growing fragility and crisis around the world, it is time once again to take a more purposeful, unified approach, focused on global growth and stability. I've called for a response based on the right balance of investment and fiscal discipline, open markets, reforming the global trading system and tackling the cost of living crisis. That approach was echoed by the leaders' declaration from Johannesburg. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to say that the summit confirmed that the UK will take on the presidency of the G20 in 2027, the first time it's returned to the UK since 2009. It will be a proud moment for our country, part of our work to restore Britain's international leadership, which was neglected for so long. And we will use that presidency to drive the agenda that I've been talking about today, to drive growth and opportunity, to create jobs, cut the cost of living, and fundamentally strengthen the economic security of the British people. That is what we're doing at home and abroad, and I commend this statement to the House. Mr. Speaker, on the text of the agreement that's being worked on in Geneva, there was an intensive discussion about this, as she would have expected at the G20, involving a number of key allies, both the E3 plus key coalition willing allies, and the strong consensus was that we should work with the text that's in existence, unacceptable although some parts of it are, because other parts are essential, rather than a different text, and that is the process that's going on in Geneva, and I think that's the right approach.
Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister also offer his support and that of the coalition of willing to join President Zelensky for any future negotiations with President Trump, so President Zelensky doesn't have to suffer the indignity of being bullied by Trump on his own once again, and so that Europe can show a strong and united stand?
Certainly I'll make a point this afternoon at the Coalition of Willing of expressing how united this House is in relation to the key principles. In relation to her point about President Zelensky, we are, I think, the closest ally of Ukraine in terms of respected and trusted, and that is why not only have I spoken intensively and extensively to President Zelensky over many months and years, but in particular over the last few days, a number of times, sometimes a day, including this morning, in order to do what we can to guide this into the right place.
Alex Sherwood.
Mr. Speaker, I thank once more the Prime Minister for his untinting support for Ukraine and that nothing can be done for Ukraine without Ukraine. In the last few moments, media sourced in the US have reported that Ukraine has agreed to the peace proposal brokered by the Trump administration. I know the Prime Minister will not have the detail of that, but if this is the case, I know we're in a statement now, will he come back and give the House the full details of what has been agreed by Ukraine, US and potentially Russia?
Yes, of course I will. From my discussions with President Zelensky this morning, I'll need to look precisely at that, but I suspect it won't be the whole of the agreement that needs to be reached, because obviously the discussions so far have been predominantly Ukraine-US. Obviously there are European elements that are important, NATO elements that are important, that need further discussions, and of course none of this has been back to the Russian side yet. So I'll have a look at the report and look behind the headline. If there is anything material to report, I'll of course do it. My own sense is that it'll probably be progress on the Geneva exercise rather than the agreement of all elements.